This is photography. A lot of times you go out without a plan. Make do with the conditions. Okay, started off all dark and gloomy. Now we're starting to get some light, and we could be in for a bit of a treat here tonight. And then just like that, we go from our blown out sky and very flat raw file to making a nice dreamy looking image. Hello again. Don't really have a plan today, but looking at the sky, I think we might go for a dark and moody type theme. So, often I go out and I don't have a plan. I just go out to take photos and I work out what I'm going to do when I get there. Okay, I sort of evaluate the scene, see what's happening in the sky, see what's happening in our foreground. Lots of dark clouds, lots of big puffy clouds up there, some storm clouds out on the horizon. So I think we're going to go with a dark and moody theme for today. Now things may change as the sun sets, we might get some colour. Okay, so now as you can see, the sun's just come out. So this may be a change of plan. I might show you how we're going to blow our highlights. So I'll show you a little trick in Lightroom where we can kind of hide those blown highlights. I don't want to take multiple exposures. I want to get everything today in one shot. And I'll show you a little trick we can do to get those highlights under control. So all I'm doing now that I'm set up, okay, so I'm at 2/100ths of a second, f8, and I'll show you how we can hide that and make it look really nice too. So it will look better once it gets lower. So hopefully we get a little bit of a golden glow later, and things will look really nice. Okay, now I'm just going to take some shots. And first one looks absolutely perfect. That looks really nice. Okay, so again, I'm just going to keep moving around slightly with our foreground. Okay, and we've definitely got lots of sun in the shot now. Okay, and I don't really want that in my shot. Okay, I don't want the mainland over here. I do want this very much as a lone tree, and I know from experience this angle here with these roots there, they look really nice. Okay, and again, I just want to keep an eye on my foreground. That's really good. I don't like the way my foreground's working, so I'm just going to come back a bit further. Don't like that one either. So I'm really just looking at the mud here, and I want the mud kind of leading out towards my shot. I don't want a big puddle. Puddles aren't quite big enough for reflections. That one's not too bad. I'm just going to try and get a bit more of this because we've got some nice golden light on that sand now. That's nice. Okay, so as you can see now we're starting to get some nice light. Okay, so that's what I mean change of plan. When we got here it was dark and moody. Now it's starting to get some nice light. So we might just change our plans a little bit. And again, I'm just going to move around, take a few different shots from slightly different angles. We're starting to lose that sun again now, which is nice. This is photography. A lot of times you go out without a plan, okay? Make do with the conditions, okay? Started off all dark and gloomy. Now we're starting to get some light, and we could be in for a bit of a treat here tonight. If we don't get another little splash of colour, I might wind it up here and we'll do some editing because I've got some nice shots that we can edit. And yeah, we'll go with that dreamy, colourful look. Okay, and I'll show you a couple of little tricks just to fix those blown highlights. And yeah, let's go and have a look at the editing. Okay, so now onto the editing side of things. And what we're going to do is split it up into two parts. So part one will be just Lightroom. So I'll show you how we do this in Lightroom, and then part two will be Photoshop. So Photoshop just gives us a little bit more control over what we're doing. Again, it's not going to be a full workflow. It's just going to be to show you how to deal with these bright hotspots, shooting directly into the sun, and how we can fix it, okay, and how we can make it look nice. Now, the first thing I'll do is I'll run through some of the photos and show you different compositions and why I think some work and some don't, and also show you why we have to shoot directly into the sun. Okay, so if we have a look at our first image, this was the first image of the night, and as you can see, we've blown our highlights, okay, because we're shooting directly into the sun, and that's a natural thing, okay. You can do multiple exposures to try and deal with that. But sometimes this works better. Having just one exposure and then dealing with those highlights is, as you'll see, it's quite a nice effect. Okay, I also mentioned in the video about having leading lines. So if we have a look, we've got these kind of lines are heading out towards our tree. Got a nice little reflection pool here, where if we have a look at our next shot, okay, there's nothing in our foreground. It is just reflections, and they're not nice reflections. Okay, so that's what I mean about just moving around and trying to get some leading lines. Even though they're blurred out, they're still lines. Okay, they're dragging our eye towards our subject. Where this thing here, everything's kind of cutting through our image. Okay, everything's going across the scene. It's not really leading our eye out. Okay, and then eventually we get to this one where shooting away from the sun in this location, we start to get all this mess creeping in over to the right, which is what I didn't want. Okay, so it's sort of, here I've just tried to get the sun just out of the frame, but again, we're starting to get this come into our frame. And then eventually, this is my favorite composition. Okay, so this, the sun, yes, we'll deal with that, but as far as composition goes, like having all of these roots, having that tree on that angle is what I like, and it looks nice. Okay, and again, our mud is kind of leading towards, we've got a few, you know, we've got a little bit going on that's just kind of leading us up towards that tree. And the ones I'm going to deal with, this is the one I'm going to do in Lightroom, and this is the one I'll do in Photoshop. So this one's an extreme example, and that's why I think Photoshop works better for cases like this. This one here, not so extreme, so we've got a little bit to deal with, okay? So let's start with Lightroom, and I'll show you how I do this in Lightroom. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, as I do with all of my images, especially my landscapes, I'm going to go to Adobe Landscape. I'm going to come down to my lens correction, remove chromatic aberration, apply our lens profile. Now with my images, I know my lens profile is just a bit too aggressive on the vignetting, and I do like to have a bit of vignetting. Okay, so that's our lens correction sorted. Next thing I'm going to do is just check my horizon. And if we just grab our ruler tool, and just find the horizon. There's a little bit of a mountain range in the background, so the horizon starts there. Click and drag, okay, and that should straighten our horizon. Okay, from here, straight away I'm going to start dealing with these highlights. Now, once again, with all of my images, I always bring my highlights down by around about 50%, lift my shadows by about 50, just to bring some dynamic range into the scene. Okay, and with this one, again, I'm going to bring down my whites and just lift my blacks a bit. I'm deliberately creating a flat image because we're going to introduce blacks and whites later. Okay, and even if we just start to boost our contrast, okay, we're bringing blacks and whites back into the image. Okay, so I'm not one of these people that takes my white point up to a white point, black point down to a black point. I think that's a waste of time, because by the time we start to do adjustments and we start to add contrast, we're adding blacks on top of our blacks and whites on top of our whites. Okay, so I like to get my image nice and flat to start with, and then introduce blacks and whites as we continue with the workflow. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit of contrast. So as I said before, that will just boost our blacks a little bit, bring our whites down a little bit. Okay, it's looking a little bit too cool, so I might just warm it up a tiny bit. Okay, now the important part, let's deal with this sky. So as we can see, even by bringing down our highlights and whites, all it's really done is just made it messy. Okay, there's no texture in there, there's no color, it's a blown out mess. Okay, so again, it's not a full workflow, it's just to show you more so how to deal with these highlights. And what we're going to do is come up to our radial filters. So come up to your masking tools, and we're going to grab our radial gradient. And the first thing I like to do is make a fairly big gradient. Okay, so just by clicking and dragging and stretching that out. Now you want your feathering up to 100%. Okay, so as the feathering's lower, it's just a harsher edge. So by taking it up to 100%, it's a nice, soft, glowy, makes the transition a lot nicer. Okay, now the magic to this is, what we do is we come down to our effects panel. So with our mask selected, down to our effects panel. And what I like to do is take the texture out, take my clarity down as well to about 50%. Texture, doesn't matter how far you go, just a little bit of texture. The important one is the clarity. The clarity will add that glow. Okay, so I'm going to bring that down by about 50. And then finally our dehaze. We're going to bring our dehaze down. And as you can see now, it's starting to add that glow. Okay, so for the sake of YouTube, I'm going to overcook it. So I recommend, yeah, probably around about 50% is a good spot to start. But for the sake of YouTube, just so we can see what's going on, I'm going to bring it down quite a bit. Okay, so as you can see already, it's starting to take that sting out of the sky and give it a nice glow. Okay, from here, I'm going to bring my temperature up. Okay, so that'll add a bit of an orange glow to it. So again, I'm just going to overcook it for YouTube. Normally I'd go up by about 20% at the most, but let's just crank it up so we can see it taking effect. Okay, so now if we have a look at before and after, we've just taken the sting out of that sky. Okay, we've just softened it down a little bit, give it a nice glow, and it comes into the tree as well. So it does look very natural having that glow through the tree. Now, as another step, what I'm going to do is create another mask, and I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to do another radial gradient, but this time I'm going to make my gradient a little bit smaller, so we're just dealing with the actual blown part. Okay, so now with a smaller gradient, I'm going to do the exact same thing again. Bring my texture down a little bit, bring the clarity down, bring the dehaze down, and add a little bit of temperature as well. So now, if we have a look at our before and after, there's where we started, there's our raw file, and now we've got that nice glow to the sky. Okay, so it's kind of, in a way, it's hiding that blown highlights, adding a little bit of texture in there, adding a little bit of color, so it's not so crunchy. Okay, so there's the raw file, and now we've just softened everything down, give it a bit of a glow. Okay, and the glow comes into the tree. So from here, now this is the personal preference, and I talk about personal preference a lot. This is just to give you some ideas of what you can do. Okay, so you might find that with that mask, you want to bring this out and get that glow right across the sky. Okay, and then it's affecting the tree, it's making the tree glow. You might want to bring it up higher. Okay, so once you've created that mask, then you can just fine tune it to your liking. Okay, you might think, okay, I like the look of this blown out sky. Let's just make that a little bit bigger. So if we click the two Y's down here, that will show them side by side. So then you can see your original raw file, and just with some very basic adjustments, we've brought it to life. Okay, we've given it that glow. We've made it nice and dreamy. Okay, now there's a lot more we can do, but again, I don't like to do full workflows because it's up to you to work out what you like. So I'm just going to give you some ideas, get you on the way of getting some basic edits done and just using the tools that we have. Okay, so there's a lot more we can do. Like I'm already, like in the original, I can see that there's some nice beams coming down from the sky. And that's where Photoshop is a much better option. Photoshop, we can kind of fine tune it. But that's kind of a pretty basic workflow in Lightroom to get that nice glow. Like I said, there's a lot more we can do, but we won't. So what we'll do now is we'll move over into Photoshop. It's going to be very similar, but there's a little tip in Photoshop that really just takes it to the next level. So let's move over to Photoshop. Okay, so now onto the Photoshop version. So very similar to Lightroom, once we open up a RAW file, it will automatically open in Adobe Camera Raw, which is essentially Lightroom. Okay, slightly different, but essentially the same. Okay, so just to save some time, what I'm going to do is just quickly skip through the Adobe Camera Raw process because it is exactly the same as what we just did in Lightroom. So if you did skip straight to the Photoshop version, just have a look at the Lightroom version, because everything I do in Lightroom, I'm doing exactly the same here in Adobe Camera Raw, and then we'll skip to when we bring it into Photoshop to do the final touches. Okay, so now the real magic happens in Photoshop. And what we're going to do now, you've probably seen this in one of my other videos, and it's called the Autumn effect. So what I'll do is I'll quickly run through the Autumn effect again. First thing we're going to do is create a copy. So with our background layer selected, on the keyboard, we're going to press Control or Command and J. So Control and J. So we're going to duplicate that layer, then come to our blending types, which are here. We're going to come down to Screen. We're going to go up to Filter. we're going to come down to our blur filters, and then we're going to do the Gaussian blur. Okay, and as a general rule, whatever megapixel your camera is where we want to be. Okay, so I'm shooting on a 6D, which is around 20 megapixels, and then I'm just going to press OK. And then finally, we're going to come up to Image, Apply Image, and these are the default settings. Okay, so just check that your layers on merge, channel RGB, blending type, multiply, and none of these are ticked. Press OK. Okay, and that's essentially our Orton effect, but that's our Orton effect at 100%. So from here we can dial it back. So if we come over to our opacity slider and that little drop down, then we can just bring that. So if we take it all the way down, there's no effect. And then if we just slowly increase it, we can sort of bring it in where we want it. Okay, so a good idea with this is go up to 100% and then create a layer mask. So down the bottom right hand corner is a layer mask. And then if we press Control and I on the keyboard, that will invert that mask. So now that's blacked out our Orton effect. So now we can't see our Orton effect, it's blacked out that layer. So if we come over to our brush tools, we change it to a white brush, because that's going to unblack out what we've done. And turn your opacity down between 20 and 30%. And then all we're going to do is, if we use our square bracket keys on the keyboard, okay, right click will show our hardness. Just make sure your hardness is at 0%, because that'll give you a nice soft brush. Okay, and then just using square bracket keys, what we're going to do is we're going to start to paint back in some of that Orton effect. And now we can just put it in where we want it. Okay, so I'm just doing a couple of little brush strokes around where that glow is. So there's before and there's after. Okay, so if it's too aggressive, what we can do is we can just dial it back. Okay, so now we can take our Orton effect back and get it to where we want it. Okay, so that's a cool way of just adding a little bit of a glow to your image. Again, there's lots of other things we can do, but I'll keep it very simple. Okay, so fix those blown highlights just essentially by dehazing, detexturizing, and turning down your clarity a bit, and it'll give it that nice soft dreamy look. Okay, and then maybe as a final step, if we just go to flatten image, as a final step, if we come down to our different blending modes, our adjustment layers, we're going to do a curve, and then I'm just going to grab that curve in the middle and bring it down to the bottom right. And what that's going to do is darken everything. Okay, so I'm just going to bring it down a little bit, and all I'm looking at is the edges of my frame. Okay, so I'm darkening down everything. So if we toggle that on and off, okay, what I want to do is I just want to black out the edges. I'm going to create an even larger vignette, which will really draw our eye towards the center of the frame. So now we have a white mask, so we can see that layer that we've created because it's white. So what we're going to do is black out the bits we don't want to affect, which is the middle. So in this case, we can let's turn our opacity up to 100%, make our brush a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to paint out the middle of the frame. So then that vignette is only affecting the outside of the frame. Okay, and then again, just dial it back to your taste. Okay, you might want just a little bit. Okay, and it just, by darkening the edges of our frame, just leads our eye back in towards the middle. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe. I should be doing another live stream soon, and hopefully next time I see you, I will be live somewhere. So thank you again, and I'll see you in the next one.